Hello, everyone. I am your host, Eureka, and welcome to the Happy Child series. Today we have with us author Don Winn. He is the author of Raising a Child with Dyslexia, What Every Parent Needs to Know. And this book is a recent winner of silver medal of the Reader's Favorite Book Award. And that was just announced this week. So congratulations, Don. That's super exciting. Don is a dyslexia advocate, and he also has dyslexia himself, and he's fully committed to helping reluctant and struggling readers learn how to love to read. Don frequently addresses parents and educators on how to maximize the value of shared reading time and how to help dyslexic and other struggling readers to learn how to love to read. He's published articles about dyslexia and reading in MD Monthly, the Costco Connection magazine, Today Parenting, Fostering Families Today, as well as many others. So welcome, Don, and such an honor to have you with us here today.
Thank you. I'm happy to join you.
Yeah, so, I connected with Don and I was so intrigued with your story, and I would love for you to share with this audience and tell us a little bit about your background and your struggles and your experience with dyslexia.
Yes, I grew up in the 60s, and in the 60s, very little was known about dyslexia. It wasn't recognized in most places. And I had not just dyslexia, but I also had some of the sibling conditions. There are several of them. The ones I had was dyscalculia, dysgraphia, and a little bit of dyspraxia. And so it wasn't just reading that I had to struggle with. Now, this wasn't a problem until I started first grade. And once I started first grade, that's when the problem started. I had a very difficult time understanding what the teacher was presenting to the class. I wasn't learning to read, and I struggled. And I started having a lot of physical symptoms, a lot of anxiety. This was noticed by my parents and by my teacher. They didn't really know how to help me. It was decided at the end of the first grade that I really needed to stay back in first grade another year. That's how bad it was. It wasn't until the second year in first grade when a special ed teacher was taking an extension course on dyslexia. And when my first grade teacher discussed my symptoms, what I was struggling with, she recognized those from her course and said, it sounds like he has dyslexia. So the decision was made to work one-on-one with me for about an hour a day. I was excused from my regular class, and I spent an hour a day working with a special ed teacher. Now, this was a wonderful thing because reading is one of the most important skills that every single child needs to have. If you read, you learn to read, and for the rest of your life, you read to learn. And if you don't have a good foundation in reading, you're going to struggle throughout your entire life. It's going to limit you. However, just addressing reading alone isn't enough. And that's one of the things I was going to talk about as well. Once the special ed teacher helped me to be able to read, to compensate for my reading, it was as though, okay, now the problem's solved. And I was moved on to the second grade, but I was still struggling because it wasn't just reading I was struggling with. I had trouble with dysgraphia, that is being able to get thoughts or words from your head down on paper. I couldn't express myself in written form. Dyscalculia, I couldn't remember my multiplication tables. I struggled with math, sequencing, directional matters, up, down, left, right, trouble tying my shoe, telling time on a clock. All of these are related to these sibling conditions. And of course, dyspraxia is more of the clumsiness. And I won't get too much in that because that wasn't my biggest problem. And so I continued to struggle. And I had a lot of illness when I was going through school. I was constantly at the doctor with strep throat. I was home a lot. And I had anxiety, and that was my constant companion. And when you have anxiety all the time, and I started developing stomach problems from an early age, it develops those neural connections in the head, these pathways, that this is just the normal response to stress. And so throughout my young adulthood, all of my adulthood, my response to stress was going to my stomach, was anxiety. And the thing is, I didn't understand it. There was never a conversation with me about what dyslexia was, how it affected you. They didn't understand the sibling conditions. And so that's why I think one of the most important things for every child is the social and emotional learning and support and accommodation. Reading's important. You need to get the technical. You need to have help with that. But it doesn't stop there. A parent needs to, and an educator needs to understand it themselves and help their child to understand what it is they're dealing with and why, that they're not stupid, they're not broken, they just have a different way of learning. And to be able to support that and to provide accommodation. They didn't have accommodation back then. Today, even though there's still a lot of ignorance about it, there is support available in a lot of schools. And my book, Raising a Child with Dyslexia, really focuses on the social and emotional aspect of helping your child.
First of all, I love that you said that about how as children we learn how to read, and then we as adults we read to learn. That like really resonated with me because that's so true. And yeah, definitely the importance of the social emotional support and having the child understand, how they learn differently. And I think, with education, a lot of times it's very cookie cutter, like with the curriculum, and not necessarily tailored to the child's learning style and or learning the way that they learn. And so I think that's a super important point to note as well. So for parents who want to support their child in this social emotional way, do you suggest them to talk with a therapist or psychologist, school personnel? What are their resources?
I think it's great to talk with anyone that can help them, and that would include the school counselor. But even then, there's a lot of schools that still they may know the word dyslexia and they may say they provide some support, but they're still lagging way behind on what is needed. And that's one reason for my book. And I would suggest that every parent, if they're able to get a copy of the book, and it's also available on audio for those that have trouble reading. I make sure all of my chapter books are available on audio for that reason. But yeah, it's important that parents understand what their children need emotionally and socially and provide that. Now, one of the things that you mentioned, how you appreciated the reading aspect and how important that was. One of the most important thing every parent can do, and this starts from birth, is to read with their children, read with their child. And when they do that every day, several things happen. One, you have that bond, that closeness with the child. Two, you show your child how reading works, even before they're able to understand it. As you have them sit in your lap, you have a book open, and you take your finger and you read across the page. What are you showing them? Well, you're showing them that reading goes from left to right, top to bottom, and that every sound you make is connected with these little squiggly lines on the page. And when you do that consistently early on, they learn those early foundations, the pre-literacy foundations. This is good for every child, and especially dyslexic children, to have that early foundation. It also develops that bond, that closeness with them, because that's a safe time. And I remember one of my fondest memories. My parents never read to me, which I'm kind of sad about that. But the few times that I spent over at my grandmother's, one of the things that she would do every time, about an hour before bedtime, other than fixing a hot cup of Ovaltine, I don't really think I like it that much today, but she would have me sit in her lap, and she would pull down this big old children's dictionary, and it could have been any book, to tell you the truth. But she would open it up, and she would just kind of turn the pages slowly until I saw something that interested me, a picture in it. And then I would point to the picture. And she would then slowly read it, and she would use her finger going across the page, and I would just be captivated by that. And then when she would finish reading about it, she would ask me some simple questions. And then she would let me ask her questions. And I loved that time. I did not want to go to bed. It wasn't work. It wasn't study. It wasn't like being in school, trying to learn all the technical aspects of reading. There was no pressure. But it helped me to see the joy of reading, even before I actually learned myself, as well as that bond that I had with my grandmother. Whenever I would go over to my grandmother's, I didn't want to wait till bedtime. Can we read right now? That's how much it means to children when a parent is consistent in doing that every day. It develops those important pre-literacy skills before they even start school. And so I recommend that every parent take time to do that with their children. Now, if for some reason they struggle with reading themselves, you can use audiobooks and then follow along in a regular book. There are always ways to work around that. But I think this is one of the most important things every parent can do before their child starts school, to begin giving them that reading foundation.
I love that you shared that, because in addition to the bond and pre-literary skills that you're teaching your child, it creates a very positive association with reading, that it's safe and it's fun and it's something to look forward to. Because I think what happens is when we're in school, it's like it's stressful, we don't know where, you get lost or you can't keep up, and then it's just like you said, it's the pressure of learning how to read, and then they start to associate reading with those negative experiences. So what you're suggesting with parents reading to their child, with their child every single day, even from a really young age, creates that positive association with reading. And I think that's so, so important. So thank you for sharing that.
Yes. And there's another aspect to that as well. As they get older and begin to learn to read themselves, you still want to continue reading with your child even after they start school and on into the school years, because then they develop that love of story. I loved stories when I was a kid. I loved to be read to. I remember my first grade teacher had story time where she would, for, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes, she would read from a book. Every day she would read a little more from the book. And I couldn't wait for that because I was just captivated by the story. And when you do that, you develop that love of story. And when you have a love of story, where do the stories come from? Well, they come from books. Well, how can I learn more stories? Well, that's where reading comes in. Well, then reading must be worth the effort. Even though it's hard, a lot harder for dyslexics, it's a lot more work to learn to read. They may be slower at it, but when they see the value in it, then they're wanting to put forth more effort to be good readers and to learn to read. And that was my case. I struggled reading early on, but I did learn to read. And I love stories. So continue to read to your child, help them develop that love of story. And then there was another aspect of that too, and that's a hero of self-reference. A hero of self-reference is where your child can see themselves in a story character. And if it's a story character that's dealing with the same feelings and challenges they are, And in the story, if that character is able to work through those problems and surmount them, then they see that, you know, I can do that too. And so picking books that have a hero of self-reference is, for dyslexics, is also a very powerful way to encourage them and help them to continue to read, even through the struggle.
It's like instilling that confidence and empowering the child.
Yeah.
So we touched on like early young children and like, you know, instilling that love of reading, but what about kids, older kids that that already have a really negative association with reading and say, I hate reading? You know, can you provide a strategy that parents can use in order to facilitate or, you know, transform that?
Yeah. It is a lot more challenging for older kids that did not have that early pre-literacy foundation and that love of reading instilled in them early on. But it's never too late. Even though they may not like reading, most children, even in teen years, they still love stories. I recommend audiobooks. Audiobooks, they'll still be getting the stories that they would normally read. And this could also help them to encourage them to want to read. Graphic novels is a good way to help reluctant readers. There's a lot of teenagers that just do not like to read, but they'll pick up a graphic novel because the reading is light. And I remember, I believe it was my niece or my grandniece who also has dyslexia. She struggled with reading, didn't really like to read. And so she got a graphic novel. And I can't remember what it was. I think it was The Odyssey. It was a very complex graphic novel. But she read all the way through that, and she loved it so much that she decided to actually get the book and to read the actual book, and she did. And it was because she had a jumping off place. And so instead of going from A to Z with your reluctant teenage reader, well, go from A to B. Say, well, you know, what about some of these graphic novels and audiobooks? Help them to, if they have a love of story, if they like stories, give them some stories that they can get into. And a lot of them will then want to take the next step and learn to read further. Now, there's always going to be those that are reluctant. And there's a lot of adults that I just don't care to read for fun. But they can continue to enjoy stories via audiobooks.
And when you mean graphic novels, do you mean like, well, you said Odyssey is a graphic novel. I'm having a hard time trying to see the Odyssey as a graphic novel, but like, do you think like, is that like comic books? Like that's something that they can start with?
It's just like a comic book, except it's actually an actual story that's in a book form that's been converted into like a comic book form. And they're usually a pretty thick book. I actually think I have one of those books in there. And it's, you know, it has illustrations all throughout and then little captions. So it's kind of like the Reader's Digest condensed version of a book with pictures. And so, yeah, a lot of kids, they gravitate towards those. I always loved pictures when I was young. Whenever I get a book, the first thing I did is go to the pictures and just study the pictures. And so when the special ed teacher was helping me to read, the first thing she would do in order for me to actually focus on the words, she would have to cover the pictures up. Because that's where my eye always went to the picture. So she would cover up the picture, she would take a ruler and she would put it right under the line, and then she would start with each word, and help me to break it up into syllables, each word, and to sound it out. So phonics was a very important part, and there was a lot of schools that got away from that years ago, which is a big mistake, because phonics is a very powerful way to help kids, especially dyslexic kids, to be able to sound out words. And that's what she did with me. She had to cover up the pictures. But for older reluctant readers, start with those pictures, and then they'll read the few words that are on that caption or on that page or that illustration.
Yeah. And also to add to that, finding something that would motivate them or something that they're interested in really helps. That motivation helps with the learning. It's like, it's almost like tricking them. It's like, oh, you're interested in Superman, or whatever subject or character they're interested in. I think motivation is also really key. And for really reluctant readers, like I'm thinking about, older teenagers,
Yeah.
which I have also encountered a lot of teenagers that hate reading. It's because a lot of times the root of that is that they have a negative association with reading, or their negative experience with learning to read, and so it's easier to just like not deal with it, right? And so we as educators and as parents can foster and create a positive experience, for them to start. And so positive experience, and then something that motivates them. I think those things are golden when trying to.
This is the
Oh,
Odyssey in
uh-huh.
graphic novel form. So let me open it up so you can actually see what it looks like. See if I got it
Yeah, I
centered.
see it.
Okay.
I'm in that page. I didn't see any text. Is there
Yeah,
text
there's
at the
not
bottom?
text on all the pages. This one has text.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's a very easy read compared to the actual book, and the pictures help them along. Um, and you make a very good point. What is it that they enjoy? Find stuff, graphic novels on a subject matter they enjoy. Um, it's reading, and if it helps them to read, then they'll be more inclined to then take it to the next level.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't know, at least here in California or in my district, we are still in the distance learning model. And I'm wondering if you had any tips or tricks in how to foster reading in the distance model.
That is a lot more challenging, and especially with parents that have to work and have trouble balancing their work and also trying to make sure their children are cared for at home. I think just doing the same things that we talked about as far as reading, take time together to read or even listen to audiobooks. Give them things that they enjoy to read, and just keep encouraging them and supporting them. And the fact, if they struggle with the dyslexia, then just understand that they're not going to be very quick about certain things, and be patient with them, and let them know that they're doing a great job.
Mm-hmm.
It may not be as fast as they would like or that you would like, but progress is progress, and you have to acknowledge the progress, because a dyslexic's journey is not an easy one, and it's not a fast one. And when you have that praise, that encouragement every step of the way, then you're going to want to then, okay, I'll keep working at it. But if they feel demoralized, feel like, okay, I just can't do it, I'm not doing it on time, I'm not meeting your expectations, then they're not going to want to put forth the effort. And so that's where that social and emotional support comes in. And I discuss that in detail in my book, all of those aspects.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely love that you touched on the progress is progress, and really acknowledging. I think the progress is more motivating than reprimanding your child for not being able to progress at
Yeah.
our speed or the school's speed of reading or what needs to be done. I think that positive reinforcement is what really motivates the child to move forward. So thank you for
Yeah.
bringing that up.
Yeah, you never motivate a child with shame or criticism. You have the opposite effect. They'll shut down.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, encouragement and praise. That's what helps them develop that grit and determination to keep going.
Mhm.
And I always refer to that as being the true, being the superpower of a dyslexic, is developing that grit and determination early on. Because when you have that, and when that's fostered, then there isn't anything that any child can accomplish.
Mhm. And isn't that true for adults as well?
Yes, it
It's the
is.
grit, determination, and the resiliency that makes us successful and happy in life.
Yep,
Yeah,
absolutely.
so also so of course I always love to weave mindfulness into all of my work because I'm also a mindfulness life coach. I was wondering how mindfulness can help with reading challenges, and or how would a parent incorporate some mindfulness when teaching reading?
Yeah. Now, your I thought about what mindfulness is and what my thought may be a little different, but this is where a parent needs to be in touch with their child's feelings and emotions and how they are doing every day, and then adjust to that. Being mindful as far as what's going on with your child, and not just continue down a certain path when you see your child's going a different direction. And so you may have to adjust things. You may have to step back and say, okay, they need the little encouragement, a little emotional support right now because they're really struggling with that. Um, and to me, that's mindfulness, being aware um, every moment in your child's life. Do I need to make adjustments? How are they doing? Are they continuing to maintain that determination to do their, if they're starting to struggle and they're starting to feel like they want to give up, then obviously you need to make some adjustment. You need to back off a little bit
Mhm.
and recenter them.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if that's what you had in mind.
Oh no, it's whatever, whatever. That's a great strategy, I think. And if I can add to that, I think as parents and educators, we often get frustrated when our child doesn't make the type of progress that we expect or want them to. And so one strategy that I would incorporate in there too is when you are feeling frustrated as a parent and or as an educator, and you're getting irritated and your child's acting out and that's not helping, is to look inwards and say, like, what are the reasons why I'm feeling frustrated? And a lot of times it's going to come out to be because that child that you're working with at that time is not meeting your expectations. And so bringing yourself back to, like, this is not about the child. This is my expectations that I'm putting on the child. And that's why I'm starting to feel frustrated. And that weaves into kind of like what you were saying, Don, is like meeting the child at where they are at and
Yes,
you being the adult to support them. And we can't show up and do that if we're the ones getting frustrated.
yes, exactly. So you said that very well.
Okay, we just have a few more minutes left on. Would you share about your free gift, which I think is awesome?
Yes, I do have promotional codes for my Raising a Child with Dyslexia book on audio. It's on Audible. So anyone that would like a promo code for the audio book, they can go to, I have a special page for that, and
Mhm.
they can request it there. Now there are a limited number of promo codes. I have quite a few, but I would suggest if you're interested to go ahead and jump on it. So you can get the free audiobook.
Yeah, so that link will be provided in this video's email message below the video. And as Don said, it is limited, so first come, first serve. Go ahead and click that link, and then they will give you a promo code for audio. I think I might get on that, Don. I'll be first.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. First come, first serve.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today. It was a pleasure to have you, and thank you for sharing your story and your insights and your strategies. I hope this audience, I hope you found that helpful, and I will see you guys again soon.
Thank you very much. Enjoyed it.